Hola, hey there, welcome back. Thanks for being here. Something a little different this week. It's been a busy stretch. I've been hammering away at getting my taxes done and a whole bunch of odds and ends. So I don't have a new interview, or at least I didn't have a new recording lined up for this week. I got lots in the pipeline, lots of people that are I'm going to be chatting with coming up over the next few weeks, but there's a bit of a scramble to get something new for this episode, and that's fine. It happens from time to time. I always tell people, well, if you can, if at all possible, you should still try to get something out on your feed, on your regular schedule, just really out of respect for your audience, so they know that you're still there, that they didn't miss something, that nothing happened, and just to say, hey, I've got something different this week, or a replay, or just a little short announcement. So it's a good habit to get into, and I'm doing my best to follow my own advice and do that this week. But in thinking of that, well, what should I say? What kind of update can I give you? And even do something a little more substantial. The first thought for sure is, well, maybe I could find some kind of replay from, hey, we've got years of episodes here on the Multipod going back to 2018, up to 130-something total episodes. So there's lots to choose from. So I thought, well, what might make sense, at this point in time? And my mind started thinking to an episode, a bonus episode, in fact, that I did towards the end of March. It was almost 7 years ago to the day, end of March of 2019, with my brother. And there was a bonus episode. It was when we did a few of these back in the early days of the Multipod, kind of episodes on different topics. They weren't necessarily about multipotentiality. We had the platform and the podcast, so let's talk about something different because we're multipotentialites, right? And that was a chance to talk about travel. Now, the thing with my brother, Andy, at the time, he had just come back from a multi-week trip to Cuba with his family, with his wife and 3 young kids. Part of the reason they went is because their youngest was, about 4 months, 3 or 4 months old at that point. So they were off on parental leave and they had the time to go and do kind of an extended trip. And they thought, well, let's go check out Cuba. So that got me thinking this time around, this is interesting. This is kind of a dip into, some recent history, but man, how things have changed in the last 7 years. I mean, it's hard to know really what Cuba is like right now. It's changing all the time. I mean, who knows what it's going to be like even just a few weeks or something from now. So this is a really interesting replay episode, a snapshot in time of what Cuba was like in 2019. And the point is that they traveled not to the resorts or anything. They really went to see the real Cuba. They were traveling around by buses and taxis and in the towns and staying in people's homes. They speak some Spanish, Andy and his wife Laura, so they were able to get around. But really to experience the real Cuban culture, and not just what a lot of us see at the resorts when you go. So that was why I wanted to talk to him about the trip in the first place. And then it becomes all that much more poignant now, thinking about what's happening there right now. Not to mention the state of the world, of course, in general. And when it comes back to travel, well, this is also part of it, is that Andy and Laura and their 3 kids are traveling also right now. They're on this big round-the-world odyssey of multiple months, like 6-7 months. They spent a couple months in China, and then they went to Egypt, and then at least a couple weeks in Turkey. And as I'm talking right now, they've just arrived in Greece, I think yesterday. So they're still on the move. They've got another few weeks more coming up in Europe. Now, maybe I'll catch up with him, at some point, or when they get back home, I think sometime in June of this year, and we'll learn more about that trip. But it kind of brings it a bit full circle, right? Because there they were on that trip 7 years ago, and now here we are in 2026, and they're doing a similar thing. And yeah, as ever, it's a chance to just reflect on how much the world has changed, how much travel has changed. I mean, when Andy and I talked there in 2019, that was long before I thought that, my family, and my wife Emily and our kids would ever have the chance to travel again anytime soon. But let me think, 4 years later, we did, in the beginning of 2023, is when we did our big trip to Portugal, mostly, and a bit of time in Morocco and in France. And you'll hear even at the end of our conversation here that Andy and Laura were actually in between trips. They still had some time. So after Cuba, they came back home to Ontario, Canada, and then they went over to France for another couple of weeks or so. So you'll hear us talk a little bit about that. And I was kind of envious, I want to go back to France and travel and stuff too, but we did. I mean, it's a lesson in patience, I guess, and perspective that, if you want something, you can make it happen. It may take some time, some planning. I mean, this trip they're on right now took years of planning and dreaming and preparation, and now here they are. So it's fun to relive it, and I really hope you enjoyed this replay episode. Now, it's audio only. This is long before the days of us doing a video here on the multipod, but it's fun, just you can really close your eyes and concentrate and think about, the images that he talks about and the stories they have to share, the amazing experience of the kids, having this cultural immersion in Cuba, of all places. It's wonderful. So I hope you enjoy it, and we'll be back soon with some fresh new episodes and lots more people to introduce to you here on the Multipod. Welcome to the show. So today we are heading to a place that, even well into the 21st century, retains a bit of mystery to most of the world, and certainly a strong pull of adventure. We are heading to Cuba, not to the resorts and pristine beaches that are largely cut off from mainland Cuban society, but traveling through the heartland of the island. And we're doing it by backpack and with 3 young kids in tow. So my guest today just returned from 6 weeks traveling around southern Cuba with his wife and 3 kids. They're age 6, almost 4 years old, and 4 months. And the challenge for you, dear listener, is to now try and tell us apart. He's my brother, and although we sound and look identical, we are in fact 3 years apart. But we share a love for travel and adventure, which is reflected in their choice to travel to Cuba and the way they did it. So instead of just staying at resorts or going to a place, a different country, perhaps a little more developed and straightforward, although we'll learn all about the details today of how they did it in Cuba, but they decided to go to a place that challenged them as travelers and as parents, but with tremendous rewards and satisfaction as a result. So how did they do it? With 3 kids, backpacks, only a little bit of internet, maybe questionable infrastructure, and of course immersed all the time in Cuban Spanish? Well, let's find out. So welcome to the show, Andy.
Hi, Ted.
This is different. It's the first time we've ever done a kind of podcast or interview type thing before. But I remember when you told me only back in January. Now, you guys were there kind of late January till about the beginning of March, about 6 weeks. And when you told me you were going to Cuba, at first I thought you're going for a week or two, just to a resort, right? Or something like that. And you'd be home pretty soon, and then you're like, no, we're backpacking, we're doing the real experience. So then I realized just kind of the scale of what you were intending to do. So tell us, why did you choose Cuba as a place to go to?
Well, we were planning to travel. So that we have our 3rd kid who's 4 months old, and we'd always kind of assumed we would take advantage of parental leave time to travel with the kids, and we didn't really manage it with the first 2. Certainly not on as big a scale as we had hoped. So this is the 3rd and final kid. So we wanted to do a bigger trip. I'd kind of arranged to be off work for a few months, and my wife Laura was off for a few months. So we had this time to go somewhere. We initially were planning to go to Spain and France for a few months, find a little town, settle down. But then we migrated away from that. Mostly we got spooked by the temperatures in January being not super warm, more like, 0 to 10 degrees and rainy. So that kind of turned us off there. We're actually heading to France in a couple of days for 4 weeks. But we started looking around warmer places and zeroed in on either Costa Rica, Colombia, or Cuba. Colombia, this was this was in December, a month or so before we were going to leave. We're last minute planners. Colombia, we'd heard good things about from a friend. This before the crisis in Venezuela, which I guess is spilling over into Colombia. But anyways, we migrated away from thinking Colombia. We were close to going to Costa Rica because it's safe. I've been there for a little bit before, and it's easy place to travel. We had some friends that had been there and had some thoughts on where to go, but it was maybe a bit more expensive, we thought, and less exciting culturally than Cuba, based on my having been there for a couple of weeks before. And so then we started thinking about Cuba, and it presented we speak Spanish a little bit, so there's the language thing which had drawn us to Latin America, and then Cuba, there's it's interesting politically and culturally, so we we decided on heading to Cuba, and basically bought the tickets about 3 or 4 weeks before we left, and jumped in.
That's great. That's the epitome of last second travel for sure and planning. So Andy has three kids. I've got two kids. You'll hear a bit of background noise as you're listening to our show here, but it's the kids having fun on a Saturday morning. It's all part of the fun here of our young families. At any rate, tell us, where in Cuba did you go? And we'll do our best to describe it a bit here in an audio format. But where were you in Cuba?
Yeah, so we flew into Holguin, which is a small city on the east part of Cuba, and we flew home from Veradero, which is in the west. The island actually runs kind of east-west. And it was nice actually to have kind of anchors or bookends on our trip. Laura's brother had booked a resort vacation in early March in Veradero. So we had that we wanted to visit him, see him in Cuba. So we had that idea that we would go to Veradero. I really wanted to see the east part of the island because we'd been to Havana briefly a few years ago. And I wanted to get to Santiago de Cuba, which ironically we didn't actually manage to get to it. So we were kind of focused in on the east. And then the fact of visiting Laura's brother really created the kind of flow of our trip on all sorts of different ways that we, geographically, that we would travel from the east to the west. Whereas if he wasn't there, who knows? We might have just kind of circled around. But as a result of trying to get to that destination, we knew we were going to arrive there and end there. And everything in between was obviously going to be a trip from east to west in Cuba. And that was basically our starting point.
So by east, I mean Cuba kind of runs, if we picture the island, it's fairly long, fairly narrow. It kind of slopes down a bit from like Havana's kind of, if you think about the top left corner, and then you slope down a bit to the bottom right corner, and that's where Holguin is, which is one of the resort gateways, I guess, because a lot of people fly into there and then take a shuttle or a bus, an hour or two to the coast to get to their resort. But it's also a hub airport if you want to explore that part of the island. So from there, did you spend most of the time in that kind of southeast part of Cuba and then make it quickly up to Veradero, or did you make lots of stops along the way?
We ended up making lots of stops. I should say that we naively thought that Cuba was small. So we booked our ticket. We were looking for the cheapest one-way flights in and out. And then only after that did I do a Google Map search. How long is it from Holguin to Veradero? How big a trip do we need to make? This being Canada, it's really big, and Cuba's really small. It's only going to be a few hundred kilometers. Turns out it's about 980 kilometers from Holguin to Veradero. So like way farther than we thought. But we had the idea that we were going to kind of go a week in a few different places. We ended up actually moving around a lot more, and especially later on, once we were confident in what we were doing, we knew the kids were traveling great. We weren't so intimidated by travel days and packing a bag. But generally speaking, we spent about 4 nights in a place and then moved somewhere else. We spent the first 2 weeks in and around the Holguin area. And in terms of the like flights and resorts and stuff, pretty much every province in Cuba has a resort area. It's a huge part of their provincial economies.
Sure.
There are provincial identities and local governments that have, their own taxation and character and things like that. So each of the provinces, it seems like, has developed their own resort area with their corresponding hub for international flights. So for Holguin, it's kind of the anchor for the Cuadralavaca area. Santiago de Cuba, farther east, has its own resort area. Santa Clara is a city in the middle that has the anchor for the Cayo Santa Maria resorts, etc., etc. And so you can kind of go to different places on the island because they all have their access to the coast and the resorts. Strangely, the cities are pretty much all inland. So we went to Holguin, and we were only there for a couple nights, maybe I think 3 nights, and then we went to the coast to Cuadralavaca and stayed in a casa particular. So this is kind of the main piece of info for traveling in Cuba outside of resorts, is that you stay in people's houses, which is like renting a room. They call them casa particulares, which just means a private home in the guidebooks. In actual fact, in Spanish, they call them a hostel, which just like in English is like a place that you stay. Because it took me a while to figure this out. I said, we're staying in a casa particular, which just meant private house. And that was confusing to people in Spanish. Oh, you mean you're staying in a hostel that's in a private house?
Oh, so they don't use that term in Cuba.
not without the modifier of a hostel, because that's like
Okay.
staying in a house. Not we in English we understood it as like I'm staying in a B and B, but it doesn't mean B and B. It just means private house. Anyways, there's like thousands of these because it's the easiest way for Cubans to have a private business. It's obviously highly regulated, being Cuba, but lots of people have opened up a part of their house, multiple rooms, or developing their house to be a casa particular, and it makes it easy for traveling. We had booked our first night in Holguin using Airbnb, which is, if you look on Airbnb, there's a fair number of places listed there of these casas particulares.
Hmm.
That was actually something that we didn't continue to do in Cuba, both because we liked being able to be spontaneous and kind of follow our noses in recommendations that we would get, but it's also not necessarily that easy to get on the internet at a good quality all the time. And that first night that we'd booked, thinking we were being responsible parents booking our first night, at least, turned out they didn't know what we were talking about when we showed up with our Airbnb reservation. So they're not necessarily plugged into that system anyways. I think, the guy's son had set it up for him, and we'd made this reservation, and we showed up. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
So was it a scam, or is it
No.
communication?
They were really nice about it. And they're like,
Okay.
someone's staying here. Like, you can't stay here. We already have it rented out. It's like, oh, great. Here we are with like no sleep, having just flown with these kids to this hot place. We were feeling very overwhelmed. The first night, they were a big plan to be responsible, and it's all fallen through. But
Well,
they walked around to different places, the neighbors, and hey, do you have room up there? Oh no, we're full too. Oh, try that lady down the street. She's got a place. So they took us around and found a place, and it was fine.
wow. Well, I mean, this is going to be a theme of the whole our whole conversation, I'm sure, is your comfort levels as parents, right? Traveling with kids and being spontaneous and so on. But I mean, I'm curious about the type of planning that you were able to do once you were there. How hard was that? What kind of infrastructure exists in Cuba to plan travel? Do you use mostly books? Do you use just call people to telephone? There is internet, and I've been to Cuba too, and sometimes it's fairly strong, but still, you never really know what to expect, right? So, did you
Yeah.
usually just kind of show up in a place and see what was available, or did you try to book some places, whether it was accommodation or transport or anything else ahead of time?
No, it was so easy. Like the hosts at the places we stayed, at the houses we stayed, basically acted as our tour guides. It's actually like
Oh, cool.
frustrating now. We're planning this trip in France and Spain, and like we like planning last minute, relying on local advice, that kind of thing. And everything in this France thing is like pushing us towards book in advance. Like we went to look at train tickets, and it's like, oh, you didn't book it 3 months in advance? Well, there's no seats, or you can't get that pass because it has to be mailed to you. Like what? Like we can't just
Yeah.
show up at the train station and like say I want to go here and like get on the train? No, you can't do that. Whereas in Cuba, like the first place we went, I like walked to the square with a backpack and was like, oh, we want to go to this town. No, but right, we booked a resort for a few nights just to kind of have it a bit easier. And the agent who booked it for us was like, oh, we said we want to stay in a casa
Hmm.
beforehand. And he's like, oh, I know a woman in Guadalajara. Her name's Louisa. Here's her number. I'll call her. She'll be expecting you. And so then, the next day I walked to the square, like got a taxi, like, hey, we want to go here. Drove us there. We show up in this like town with this apartment building, and out comes Louisa, like, oh, hey, you must be the Canadians. And look, there's a problem with my electricity. It's not working, but I know a great place down the road. And she like climbs into the cab with us, and we go off down to this amazing place that we ended up staying for like 10 days.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and then that place we said, oh, we didn't actually know where we wanted to go at that point, but we said we wanted to see Trinidad. And so she said, oh, I think I know someone there. Let me call and make a reservation, or call this woman for you. So she, in Cuba, a lot of there is internet, like actually surprisingly widespread and easy to access, but people don't necessarily have it, or more so even are used to using it that much. So there's still these
Hmm.
kind of networks of relationships between the owners of these casas and taxi drivers looped
Yeah.
into that. Oh, I know a taxi driver, and he has a casa, or he knows a guy in this city who has a casa, and they kind of have a few ideas of different people that they've met, people who come from other places or who they've sent in that direction before. And so we kind of did a lot of this following recommendations through this this kind of back channel network of owners of casas, which really worked out for us. Like we went from Guadalavaca to this tiny little beach town because the owner of the place we stayed in Guadalavaca knew a taxi driver from Holguin because he had a casa and they sent people back and forth to each other. But the taxi driver knew the woman in the little beach town that we went to. And then he also knew a person in Camagüey, which is the next city we went to. And so he'd kind of, just because we got this ride with this taxi driver, he was able to kind of call our next place. And then the guy in Camagüey knew a guy in the next place, and, kind of on and on and on. You just keep following people's recommendations. A couple of times it didn't work out and we defaulted back to the guidebook. We had a Lonely Planet guidebook, which was helpful for like maps and context and things like that. But it wasn't something that we actually had to rely on that much. And the other fallback too was that all of the places to stay have a little blue sign up front. So you can just walk around and knock on the door, which we did one night in Matanzas at the end. There was a mix up with our place that we thought we'd confirmed for 3 nights that we were going to be there. And then we started hanging our laundry to dry, and they're like, aren't you leaving tomorrow? Like, why are you hanging your laundry? Like, oh, I thought we were staying 3 nights. So then we had to wander around the block, like looking for these signs and, scoping them out, which was totally easy to do as well. So there's, you can look in the guidebook, you can look on Airbnb, you can just get recommendations from the people you're staying with, or you can just walk around. And there's tons of these casas to stay in. So there's like zero risk of not finding accommodation, basically.
Was it very busy when you were there? Did you run into other tourists?
It wasn't super busy, depended where we were, but there were some other tourists depending on the spots. Almost all of whom were Europeans. The resorts are totally jammed with Canadians. Like 90% of the people in the resorts are Canadians or Russians. But outside of the resorts, like you basically the only other foreigners we saw were Europeans, pretty much, with a few exceptions.
So did you get a sense that it was any kind of a well-beaten tourist path that a lot of people do this, or it's because people have their casas, right, and their blue sign, but like how much so-called business would they really get?
I think it's like, that's a great question. I wondered that too. And I don't know, percentage of days that they're booked. I think depending on location, the place we were in Guadalavaca, they had 3 rooms they could rent. And it seemed like they were pretty busy, like pretty much all the time. They really had 2 rooms, and then they had a 3rd room that they could they slept in, but they could crowd into one room when they had the opportunity to rent it too. But they're in Guadalavaca, which is right by the resorts and the beach and stuff. But the other, we were in Camagüey, which is inland, like a lot of the cities. And it was a nice, super nice casa. It was like a boutique hotel, basically. And they had, I think, 5 rooms or something like that. And they seemed to be consistently pretty busy too. So there must be a lot of demand, and because they seemed like it was pretty busy. I mean, we were there in the peak season. It gets pretty slow in the rest of the year. The prices of the casas we were staying at wouldn't be accessible for regular Cubans. And apparently there's a separate network of casas that are priced for domestic travel. That being said, there's now the ability for American Cubans to travel to Cuba. And so I think that's probably a lot of the business too, I assume, although maybe those Cubans stay with their family in Cuba. I don't know.
Yeah, that would change a lot, though, for sure. I can imagine, sure, people would stay with their family, but if they want to travel a bit and see the island, then they need a place to stay. So what kind of prices were you looking at? And do you pay, well, a couple of other questions. Do you barter? Do you negotiate price? And do you pay in the local pesos or in the convertible pesos? For those who are not familiar with Cuba, if you go to the resorts, especially, generally if you're a foreign traveler, then they want you to pay in the convertible peso, which is pegged to the US dollar, as opposed to the local economy. And Cuban nationals, they'll use the Cuban peso, which is worth much less, but a whole different kind of value system. So what kind of prices did you have? What did they charge, and in what currency?
Yeah, so our budget was not including the flight to and from, but other than that, our budget was 100 CUC a day. CUC is the currency, the exchangeable currency, which is more expensive. And we managed to stay within that. And that included accommodation, food, activities, and transportation domestically. So that's about 145
Canadian
a day,
Yeah.
and not including the international flight.
Right.
we didn't do a lot of activities. Mostly with the kids, it was just walking around or going to a playground or that kind of thing. But basically, the casas we are almost universally between 25 and 35, and we noticed that prices migrated upwards the closer we got to Havana. In the east, it was more like 25 or 30, and then it started to be 30 or 35. We never paid more than 35 CUC a night, and that would not include breakfast, despite what the guidebooks seem to be saying. So if you get breakfast in your casa, again, the prices would migrate up. It started in Holguin, it was like 3 per person, and then by the time we got to Havana, it was more like 5 per person. We would get 2 full breakfasts, and then we would get 3 full breakfasts and split one of them for the kids. So we'd start the day with 3 breakfasts in the house, made it easy. In some places where they didn't offer that, we would have to rush out and try and find breakfast, which you can do. The guidebook, I don't know, it's weird. Like the authors must speak Spanish and know how to interact with the local culture, but maybe it's just how they're writing it. I don't know. It was weird that like the restaurant recommendations in the guidebook were all like at a price that you can find stuff for way cheaper than that if you are willing to eat the like street food or the places that you pay in the national currency, the moneda nacional. Mm-hmm. And Cuba is like very safe and clean and sanitary. So, for example, we would go down and find like a yogurt drink where you like, it's great. You go to a counter and like they fill the glass, like a glass up with yogurt, and you drink it. And then when you're done, you put it back on the counter and they wash it and fill it up for the next person. So it's kind of a queue waiting for yogurt and the glass to finish the glass so they can get their yogurt. Paying in the national currency, you go and it's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 moneda nacional for a glass of yogurt, which would be 16 cents. One moneda nacional would be like 4 cents because you get basically 25 moneda nacional is the same as 1 CUC. So then like sometimes you're paying in a combination of CUC and moneda nacional, or you pay in CUC and they give you change in one or the other. I find it useful to collect moneda nacional because you can't get it at the banks. You have to just get it through transactions. And often you pay a bit of a discount with the moneda nacional because there's a bit of an unspoken, like, if I pay in CUC, it's going to end up being a little bit more. Often there's prices listed and I can kind of understand what it should be in CUC, but somehow it always ended up being a bit more. Anyways, and helpful to just be able to pay in what the thing is listed in, which is often, if you're buying something cheap, in the moneda nacional.
Did they frown on you a bit if you wanted to pay in the Monero? Because as foreigner, they want to get the convertible, the CUCs,
it's
right?
6 or 1/2 of the other. I thought it would be, but it's like they're interchangeable, so it doesn't really matter. It's more about what you're buying. Like you get a pizza on the street and it's 15 moneda nacional, and that's just what it costs. Like they have the price listed, and that 15 is 15, whether you're converting it to CUC or not. It's the same amount of purchasing power.
Oh, I see. Okay. Huh. Well, certainly for the owners of their houses, their casas, I mean, to bring in, say, 50 convertible peso CUCs a night, and basically, which is US dollars, that's a lot of money. That's got to be
huge.
Yeah,
I think
huge
a lot of that they would pay taxes on, and they would have a lot of expenses. Because the weird thing is, a lot of goods, such as there are in Cuba, there's not a lot to buy, but the things that they would need to buy to be able to run their casas would be valued at what they would cost here. Like a fridge would cost $300 or more there, or TV would cost the same it would cost here. So without the money coming in at that level, like sure, as a government worker, they would make 25 CUC a month, and here we come in and pay more than that for one night of accommodation. But the owner of the casa then has all these costs. They need to buy construction materials to renovate the place, to make the extra bathroom so that they can rent their place out, and need to buy all these extra beds, or there's often a fridge in the room, or a TV even, and all of that costs money at that cost of what it would be in Canada, the United States.
Yeah.
Sure, they could go down to the market. Well, even food was quite expensive at markets and things, but sure, they could go and buy that cheap pizza on the corner and have access to that higher income from renting their place. But their costs, I'm assuming, would be significant, and at North American costs, and then they also pay taxes on what they earn in the casa.
I want to talk a little more about, I guess, logistics. What kind of food did you eat? What's Cuban cuisine like?
Yeah, well, so the sweet thing was that we got to eat out every single meal for 6 weeks. We didn't have to cook at all. We couldn't. There wasn't a kitchen that we could
Yeah.
use. Food was really expensive to buy. Like you go to a grocery store, so there weren't even really grocery stores so much like we would think of it, and there's hardly anything available to purchase. And what there was basically more expensive than just going out and eating. If because we had figured out kind of where to eat cheaply. The food is like not very flavorful or interesting, but it's great for kids. Pretty much what we would eat was either chicken or pork, and you get like I mean basically we figured out one key thing, which is ordering things that weren't necessarily on the menu. We would ask for congri, which was rice and a little bit of beans, or potaje, which was like a bean soup. But the menus are all have the same things. It's like fried chicken, fried beef, or fried pork, basically variations thereof. So we would kind of look around for places that would have a full plate for, between 3 and 6 CUC per plate, and that would be a big meal for us. And we get three of those, split one of them for the kids, and then we've eaten, lunch or dinner for $10 to $15 kind of thing. And again, we eat breakfast in that place we stayed usually, and lunch we just get us snacks out on the street. But we didn't cook at all the whole time. It was great and easy. We got a bit tired of the food. It's not super tasty, and it's a lot of rice and bread and beans, and not a lot of flavor.
Yeah, I wondered about that because I've been to the Cuban resorts and it's not much better there, really. But
Oh, the resorts, holy moly!
you mean it's the resorts are better?
Oh my gosh, it's like that's where all the food goes.
I guess. Well, that's funny. Honestly, though, I really thought that, the resorts they have because maybe such a volume or something and like they stretch the food, they stretch the spices or sauces. I'd kind of thought that, okay, the local Cubans, like, they're going to keep the good stuff for themselves to the extent they can with some kind of local recipes, obviously. But is it just not part of their culture, or is it that obviously they can't get the type of
I don't
things
know.
that, yeah,
I think it's probably partly due to scarcity. And I would say that my sense is that it's the opposite, that all the good stuff goes to the resorts because they need that for their economy so much. The foreign capital that comes in through that, the resorts, that's why they're just building tons of these. And people are critical of it because it's like, oh, all we do is build resorts. Like we need to diversify our economy more, or it's creating disparity. Those that have a resort job and have access to that
yeah,
and where the tips versus people who don't. And so there's, Cubans complain about it to some extent, the resorts kind of taking over the economy, but they also rely on it and people who have good jobs in a sense. We definitely talked to some people who had like worked in that and were like happy to be out of it because it's so intense and you're like serving foreigners all the time.
yeah, and they work six
And
days a
it's a
week.
brutal culture. Yeah, like we talked to one woman who she was a guide, which was like a great gig.
Hmm.
So much access to tips and all of that. But she would do these like crazy long days where she lived in a city, had to commute an hour or two to get to the resort, and then started a
Yep.
tour in the morning. Picking people up at different hotels, starting at 7 in the morning or something. So she's like left her house at 5, does this tour of 3 cities, and then drops people back off at their hotels like at 8 at night, and then goes back home. And she started at 5 and finished at 10 or even later.
Wow.
Crazy. And
And
so
then off
anyway,
again the next day. Yeah.
yeah, so making a good income or whatever, but by Cuban standards, but totally burned out from it.
Now, would that be seasonal? I would think there's a high season and low season.
Yeah, I suppose there'd be some of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that paradox that, it's like people have good jobs. You hear about the resort jobs are good jobs, and obviously they get the tips and get that extra income. But man, it's long days. It's, and so many of these resorts are like isolated far from the towns. I've been to Cayo and it's like 2 hour drive to the nearest town of any kind. So
Yeah.
all the staff, if you go there, all the staff you see there, you can imagine they've been up since 4 in the morning, just to get on their bus to get to work.
They do provide buses for the workers, which is
Yeah.
nice. And the culture of most of the resorts is, which I think people like about Cuba, is that there's a camaraderie between the staff, and there's not the management breathing down your neck, and
That's true.
staff go and eat at the buffet and like
Yeah, that's true. They do seem to enjoy their jobs, and I think it's genuine. Yeah.
yeah, I mean that's just Cuban culture. It's like
Hmm.
they're determined to be kind to each other. People describe it like they're a big family, and it's true. Like walking down the street, like they're all hollering to each other and like, "Hey, buddy," and "Oh, hey, I haven't seen you," and like it seems like everyone's their best friend walking down the street. It's incredible.
That's nice. So even as a foreign traveler just passing through, you get a sense for that community.
Oh yeah, big time.
Mhm. Now, I want to make sure to talk about how you got around as well. So, what was the transport infrastructure like? Did you take trains? Do you take taxis? Do you hire those fancy old cars from the 50s to get around?
Yeah, we traveled in luxury, we think. Basically, we had a door-to-door pickup in a taxi, which we kind of fell into that habit based on where we started our trip and what we were trying to do. There are buses, but well, I mean, I should say off the top that we never there's a bus line for foreigners called Via Azul,
Hmm.
and we never actually ended up taking it. And they run basically between the cities, and you have to buy your ticket in advance, air conditioned bus. Based on the size of our family and the price of those tickets, we realized, and where we wanted to go, which was often not directly between places where those buses went, and based on the schedule of those buses, which was often not great, like leaving early in the morning or late at night,
Sure.
we quickly migrated exclusively to traveling by taxi. So, for example, from Holguin to Guadalajara, which was 50 or 60 kilometers, which on Cuban roads, which are a mix of buses, donkeys, horses, bicycles, and pedestrians, you don't actually travel that fast, even though you could, in theory, go 80 or 90. And sometimes you do. Often you're going 10 or 20. So, that's 50 or 60 kilometers would take an hour and a half or something like that. And in the east, again, price is getting more expensive as we went farther west. But I think that cab ride was like 30 CUC or something like that. Versus the bus, again, with not the ideal schedule, and with we had one big backpack basically, and then a backpack that was more or less a glorified diaper bag with diapers and crayon drawing books. You think like, okay, we're going to pay $5 from where we're staying to get to the bus terminal, and then take a bus for 10 or 15 by the time we buy tickets for the two older kids plus the two adults, and then some kind of taxi at the other end to get to where we're going, depending how far a walk it is. Okay, now we're at basically within 10% of the price kind of thing. So let's just take the taxis. So we ended up doing that, and it was a fabulously easy way to travel. And we also got to have the convenience of stopping when we wanted. Often the taxi drivers would like stop in at their house on the way because they wanted to get food for a longer trip or to do some little errand. And I would often sit in the front with the kids in the back, so I could chat with the taxi driver and practice my Spanish and learn, various things from the taxi driver. So it was enjoyable. And, and you're driving along in the taxi with, oftentimes it was one of these old American cars. Sometimes it was the very small Lada cars, but it was a great way to travel and super easy. And I think depending on where we were going, not significantly more expensive than taking the bus. We tried to take the bus one time. We realized it would have been way cheaper because actually kids pay half price tickets, which we didn't realize. So, if there could have been situations where, we could have walked to the bus station, the tickets wouldn't have been that crazy. And if the bus left at a decent time, it would have been probably half the price of taking a cab.
Right.
But all of those variables usually, and that, where we wanted to go was on the bus line. All of those variables basically rarely matched up for us. And the people we stayed with were so helpful. And there's so many people with a car who rented out and are happy to ride that it was easy, like they would call someone and arrange it. We even did a ride from the little beach town we went to, which was like way off the beaten track. And, they called the local guy who had a taxi. He drove us an hour and a half to the nearest city. And then the guy from Camagüey, which was like another 2 hours up the road, they somehow knew a taxi driver. He drove to Las Tunas, the other city, to pick us up. So we're coming from the beach, get dropped off. They've somehow got each other's cell phone numbers, the two taxi drivers. Like, I'm going to stop at this bus stop place by the side of the road. So then we go there, we're by the side of the road at a, snack stand kind of thing, and waiting there. And sure enough, here comes the other guy from the other direction, hop in his car and keep going back the other way. It's like, how do they arrange these things? They just, I mean, it's easy in a way. They know each other and they
Yeah.
have networks that they develop. But for us, it was like the workload on our part was like, oh, we're in this little beach town with this nice woman who's renting us the floor of her house. And like, oh, we want to go to Camagüey in a couple of days. Okay, great. And then like, do you want us to find a taxi for us? Yeah, that'd be great. And then when we want to go, taxi's out front, load the bag in the car, and like
There you go.
go.
Huh.
What's the address where you're going? Yeah, great. I'll take you there. And
Huh.
it's off at the door. It was amazing.
It's like the accommodation. It's like spontaneous and word of mouth, but obviously you trust that it'll be safe and that it'll work out.
It's so safe. Cuba's like, it's incredibly safe and the people are so helpful. They love foreigners and they always would say to us, we take care of foreigners because they know that their economy is so impacted by it that it's
Yeah.
this mortal sin to do anything bad to a tourist because if they got a reputation as being unsafe, it would be such a hit. And for us, like compared to traveling, like even in Mexico, which is increasingly dangerous, or let alone other Latin American countries, Cuba's like so safe. Which is the thing about communist countries is that they often are because they have a strong government and the ability to enforce rules and norms and things like that, and that culture of camaraderie as well in Cuba that exists between the Cuban people. Both of those kind of went together to make it an extremely safe and easy place to travel.
Did you expect that going in, or is it just something you discovered once you were there?
We kind of, I mean, we didn't know about the details of it logistically, but we knew that Cubans had this like thing about them from the resorts. You can tell. At first, it's weird for us, like with our kind of service culture of like, you know, may I take your plate, sir, that we experience here,
Right.
where Cuba, it's like, yeah, they're serving you, but they're also like super chill about it. Like they may be wearing a uniform or not. They probably don't. They might call you amigo, or they might call you. They're probably not going to call you sir, but they're super friendly and have this idea of it's a pride I think that they have in their own humanity and self respect, which goes from the individual level down to the national level, which I think is a key characteristic of like regardless of what they think about their government and communism and the revolution and the struggles economically and in their day-to-day lives, like they're fiercely proud that Cuba is independent and can chart its own path.
Yeah, that's been my sense from the bit of history that I've read about Cuba is that at the end of the day, and maybe this is why I suppose as much as anything, the revolution and the system seems to have sustained to the extent it has for this long is because people are so proud of forging their path independently, especially given the history, of centuries of domination by Spain, obviously the United States right on the doorstep, and to have been able to push all that away and chart their own path is definitely a source of pride.
Yeah, and I mean it's incredible this the special period in the 90s where after the Soviet Union fell and the economy in Cuba collapsed, they lost all this international support and like the response to that, this is a huge oversimplification, but basically like Fidel and the Communist Party was like, okay, folks, like we can give it up and go back to being a pawn in the global system and Americans right on our door, or we can double down, help each other out, and let's, find our way through this. And basically said, like in policy, if you're on board with this, great. If you're not, get the hell out of the country. And like tons of Cubans left as a result, but the ones that stayed, they're like, they got through that together.
One thing I wondered about as you travel through, everyday Cuba away from the resorts, like, do you get a sense of people's day to day, how they spend their time, how they, I guess they work obviously their jobs. How do they get those jobs? Do they apply for them? It's really hard to kind of get any detail of how people actually live and build their lives.
As much as Cubans are open and welcoming, they have a sense of when they're interacting with a foreigner, and even in the language, like we could speak easily with them when they talk slowly to us, which they usually did. But then as soon as they're talking to a group of other Cubans, like what the heck are they saying? They talk so fast, and
Yeah.
which I think is analogous to not that they're trying to hide anything, but it's just like there's this whole other Cuba that as a foreigner, you don't really have a sense of, even like how they get their basic goods, and you get little snippets into it. Like they get rations and a basic amount. I don't know how it all works as much as we would try to get a sense of it and ask. The vast majority of people work for the government, and
Okay.
until recently, the government controlled like 95% plus of the economy. So we're talking like the guy in the restaurant, which in our context would seem like it's a small business owner owns a restaurant. Like
Right.
the government probably owns that restaurant, and that person gets their monthly allowance from the government, and everything that goes along with it. Now there's an increasing number of private restaurants, so that's shifting. Or like person who works at the bank, government employee. Person who works at this most of the store selling stuff, government owned store, government employee. The person cleaning the park, the person doing all those public things that we're more used to, like picking up garbage. Then like even the taxi drivers, a lot of them are government owned taxis, unless it's a private car. But a lot of the taxis are government owned. Even some of the older vehicles, I think, are government owned. People working at a resort, sure, there might be a foreign capital part owner of it, but majority state owned. They're state employees at the resort. They get their monthly amount, and
Yeah.
so the vast majority of people are still the government is their employer. So what and everything that goes along with that, and the people that aren't, I don't know. I mean, this is one of the questions we had. Do they have like a basic income like we have that regardless of whether you're a government employee or not, you still get your ration? I think they do. They might not get the wage, the money in your pocket part, but they might still get the 5 pounds of beans a month or whatever it is. I don't know how all that works. It's fascinating, and
Hmm.
you know, in a way, it's not that different from a lot of how we do things in a social democracy, where there's social services and all that. For folks in the United States, it maybe seems like a world apart. But for most of the developed Western world, where we have broad social program and government kind of providing various levels of things in all sorts of aspects of your life, it's I don't think it's really that different, but I might be wrong, and there's probably parts of it that are really different. I think, the scope of things that are owned by the government and maybe the scope of things that are distributed by the government is the main difference. And obviously culturally, there's a huge difference in terms of the education and the content of the media and the revolutionary slogans and identity that's put forward by the government, and I assume to some extent absorbed by and believed in by the people.
Yeah, I don't want to play into stereotypes, but like, did you ever feel uncomfortable while you're traveling around just day to day that, maybe you'd say something that might get you in trouble or just in passing, or
No.
there's none of that kind of atmosphere?
Oh, it doesn't feel like a police state at all. Like I felt in other, like even in Mexico or Honduras, way more scared of like the government coming down on me. Like, in Mexico or Honduras, you see guys outside of the banks with giant machine guns, or you get stopped on the side of the road and you're in a bus and everyone come on out, let's check all your ID
Wow.
and, make sure you have your passport with you. Whereas in Cuba, it's so safe. Like I would walk around on the street with my laptop and I didn't do that. I didn't have a laptop with me, but I would do that and I wouldn't thought about it at all. I wouldn't feel nervous about it at all. I would walk around at night, like the kids, totally 100% safe, and no obvious really sign of that kind of intense military thing.
Well, before we wrap up, I want to spend a bit of time talking about the perspective with the kids, because it's one thing to travel, say, by yourself or with a couple in a backpack and so on, but you guys had three kids, and one of which was in a baby carrier, I presume. But I'm sure everyone listening is wondering, well, what did you do for like diapers? What did you do for laundry and clothes? What did you wear? Were you worried about drinking water, of course, and food? And did you get vaccinations and all this kind of stuff? I mean, how did you even start to approach backpacking through Cuba with three young kids? Because you're going to tell us that it was actually wasn't that hard and it was a lot of fun.
It wasn't.
But most people, I'm sure you've heard this. You told people about your trip. Their first reaction, I can't believe you do that with three young kids, right? So how did you do it?
I mean, I think, philosophically starting off, you have to adjust your expectations, and like there's not that much to do in Cuba in general. So it's not like we felt like we were missing out. I think when we go to Paris, it might be more like, oh, I want to go to that restaurant or go to that museum, and can't do that. But I mean, basically we knew going in, like in a day we're gonna like just hang out with the kids, and that was the main focus. Like this is about hanging out with the kids, not some other adult agenda. So that was going into it with that idea. In terms of what we brought and the practicalities of it, we have three kids, age 6, just under 4, and a little baby who was 2.5 months when we left, kind of thing. So pretty little. And we brought one giant backpack with 120-liter bag, and then that was basically it. We had another backpack that we took carry on the plane that was like a diaper bag with diapers and crayons and drawing pads and toys and things like that. And we had another backpack that we could take out if we needed as a day pack. For diapers, we decided to use reusable cloth diapers because we were not sure about getting disposable diapers in Cuba. So we were very happy with that decision. We made a bunch of guesses, and reflecting on it on the plane ride on the way back, we were like actually very happy with pretty much all of the decisions that we made in terms of what to bring, with very few exceptions. You can buy disposable diapers in Cuba. They're a little bit hard to find, not super hard to find, but they're quite expensive, like more expensive than they are here. And there's not a lot of size options. We also found that the reusables worked better, like they're just more reliable diapers, which I know you can debate disposable versus reusable till the cows come home probably. The key factor in terms of diapers and laundry was the beating sun of Cuba.
Yeah, of course.
So we did a bit of laundry every day or two. The downside of bringing reusables is scrubbing mucousy breastfed baby poo off of diapers, which not so bad. But it's amazing how the sun bleaches them. So a key consideration for us when we were kind of asking about places to stay and getting advice was, do they have somewhere we can do laundry or hang our laundry at? I realized later than I probably should have that we would buy bottles of water in a big 5-liter jug, of like thin plastic, that I could turn that into a wash basin. So some of the sinks we were at would have a plug, or if it was a more of a kind of, depending on the place, sometimes they would do their own. If they did their own laundry, they would have a washing area, which we could use. But otherwise, some of the places didn't. So it was kind of like trying to do your laundry in the bathroom sink. And if there wasn't a plug, that was annoying. But I cut open a water jug, which we could then soak the clothes in, which was very handy. Obviously, I brought a clothesline, like a string of rope, 2 strings of rope to hang up clotheslines. We ended up buying clothes pegs when we were there, so I would have brought clothes pegs. So laundry thing is just like keeping up with it and relying on sunny days and things drying quickly. So that actually wasn't too difficult. We did have a few packs of disposables. We bought about 100 disposable diapers with us, and we actually only ended up using maybe 50 of them, I think. Maybe a bit more in the end. We kind of decided to just use them at the end so we didn't have to do laundry so much. But basically didn't need to use them, and except for overnight, because we don't like changing the diaper in the middle of the night. Who does? Nobody. And in terms of activities with the kids, again, we agreed that it was worthwhile eating breakfast in our casa where we stayed in the morning, even though it was a bit more expensive. Not that much more expensive, just for the ease of getting up and eating right there. The food was, fruit and a fried egg and bread, usually for breakfast, which is great for the kids. We discovered to our pleasure that walking around a city is something that our kids love to do. So I was shocked that and something we love to do, just like following our nose, exploring. So we would just walk for, leave the house at 11 in the morning and come back at 6 or 7 at night, sometimes even just walking around, go down here, go to this park, play around, get some food, keep going, go over there. Maybe there's a zoo in this place or a playground there or something to see, take a ride on a bike taxi, little activities like that. That is basically just walking around, seeing the city. Often we would have like a little thing that we were trying to do that would give us a bit of an anchor or task to excite the kids with, like we don't have a pen. Our pen died. So we need to go find somewhere to buy a pen, which was actually like surprisingly difficult. So then, we're asking, you have pens? No. And then, there's a guy selling pens. Oh, there's the pen guy. We bought the pens. And the kids are excited because we found the guy selling a pen. We bought a new pen. Or we go to a park, and we always had coloring books with us so they could color. Obviously, kids meet kids, and we had a ball with us. So I brought a deflatable ball and a little pin to pump it up with, which you could do just by blowing into it. You don't actually need a bike pump. So we'd have this ball with us all the time. And so, start a little soccer game in the square and, local kids join in. You can fill your days like that. Obviously, when we were by the beach, beach days, we would go in the afternoons when the sun wasn't so intense usually and play in the sand, swim in the waves. That was great with the kids. The beach and the baby is not a super great combo. We brought a folding up thermarest camping mat, like a little one, so we could put our baby on that. But ideally, we would get a chair because even on the mat, on the sand, on the beach, it blows a bit, so she would get sand on her. But if we were at a resort, obviously there's chairs, and we did about a week of resort time, a couple different places. But even when we weren't at a resort, if you're at a beach in more of a developed area, there's usually some guy who will rent you a chair for $1 or $2 for a day. So it's worth it. You get the chair, put the baby on the chair, and then she's a foot off the sand, and she can lie down, and it's great. So beach days were fun and easy in that way. Because we ate out, there was always the activity of like finding where we're going to eat and hanging out. Eating takes a bit longer when you're eating out. When we cook at home, it's like, okay, cereal in the bowl of milk and down your gullet, done in like 5 minutes, start to finish. When you eat out, it's like, oh, we find the place, we look at the menu, we order a thing. Then it comes, then you eat it, and you hang out a bit. It can stretch to be an hour or more.
Yeah.
So we can fill our days that way.
Were there moments when you were worried you were pushing them too hard, or they were getting a little worn out by the whole thing?
Yeah, sometimes, we would think, oh, we're getting a bit tired of each other's company. And sometimes we would try and like do activities with the kids separately. We did bring some digital entertainment with us in the form of podcasts. So we had 2 phones with us, neither of which had a SIM card in them for actually phoning, but we could connect to Wi-Fi that way. And we loaded one of them up with a bunch of podcasts with Story Pirates. I have a strong endorsement for the podcast Story Pirates.
Okay.
They're it's a podcast by basically sketch comedians who take stories sent in by kids like age 5 to 10 and turn them into either songs or skits. And so the kids love those, our daughter in particular. I also downloaded a bunch of ebooks onto one of the phones so I could read those. We read, I think, 4 of the Chronicles of Narnia books out loud.
Oh, yeah.
In the course of the trip. So that was another kind of chill out in a room where, we would often hang out for a long time in our room. One nice thing about the places we stayed was usually there was some kind of patio or foyer or terrace or somewhere where we could have a bit more space to spread out and hang out like that and color or listen to a story or that kind of thing. With the podcast especially, it was nice to be able to like turn something on and the kids can just zone out on that for an hour or even longer, and Laura and I could talk or plan what we're doing.
Sure.
Also, rum is really cheap, so we went about a bottle of rum a week, just sipping rum after the kids went to bed, or after they got up, depending how the day was going.
Do you get beer there too, or anything else? It's mostly just rum.
There's beer. It's a bit more expensive, but it's still like cheap and affordable. We would often have a beer or two with our meals. It was usually between 1 and 2 CUC for a beer, which is cheap by Canadian, certainly by European standards.
Yeah. And tell us a story about your hiking adventure. You went for a big long walk that turned into a longer walk or something?
Yeah. Sometimes spontaneity is good and helpful. Sometimes it falls through, but then sometimes that leads to more great spontaneous adventures. So we were in Trinidad, which is a beautiful city on the south coast of Cuba, super touristy, like tons of tourists. It was really weird for us to arrive there from the farther east where there's really not that much tourism outside of the resorts and just see all these foreigners, but it's a gorgeous city. We wanted to go to a river to swim because there's mountains coming down and rivers coming out of the mountains. I'm very cheap, so I agonized over every dollar spent. The chagrin of all of my family members. Anyways, we decided we were going to walk out to this river. I kind of scoped out. Oh yeah, one tool that we had, which was super helpful, is that I downloaded an offline map of Cuba, so we could know where we were at any given time, and that helped a lot in our walking around. Literally just wander and then look at the thing and be like, oh, we're here. We just go down there to get back. Anyways, I saw there's a river coming down, crosses the highway a few kilometers out of town. Let's just walk. We can get a cab if we need to. So we started walking, walked out of town. People are probably like, where the hell are those guys going? Walked along the edge of the highway and down across the river, and started walking up this smaller road up that's going up beside the river up the mountain, trying to find a swimming hole. So, at this point we've walked, I don't know, at least an hour and a half or 2 hours or something like that. And kids are doing great. It's like getting to be hot
Mm.
middle of the day, but they're doing great. Like this is 3 weeks into the trip or something, so they're good at walking and they're into it. There's like cool looking trees with giant leaves that are falling on the ground and they're like jumping from leaf to leaf and big crinkly stomping sounds. They're having a good time, but it's starting to get a bit to the end of what we can push. And then a cab. Oh, right. So this swimming hole that I had kind of scoped out from the map turned out to be like really not a swimming hole, like a muddy
Oh
trickle.
no.
But at the end of this road was a like tourist destination spot with like a restaurant and an actual swimming hole and a waterfall. But it was like another 4 kilometers up the road. So like unrealistic to walk there. But then
Ooh.
this taxi comes by and he pulls over and he's like, hey, I saw you walking out of town like a while ago. Just hop in. I won't charge you.
Really?
Just get in. And we're like, okay, I'm going to
Yeah.
say yes to that. Let's go. Because it's just at the part that people are like starting to get hot and hungry and like, okay, what are we going to do here?
Yeah.
So we hopped in. He drove us up. Didn't charge us. I tried to, offer money. And it's like, no, no, no. I said it was free. So just get going. And so we get to this touristy spot. It was 10 CC each for the adults to go on this hike to this waterfall. So we're like, oh man, like I don't want to pay $20 to go on a hike here. Like,
Saved all that money though,
it's
walking there.
yeah. Anyways, Laura's like, we pay more than that to go to the Y for a day pass. Like, just pay the stupid money and shut up. So we paid it and went on this. So then, we've walked 3 or 4 kilometers before the taxi picked us up. And then we start on this hike, which is like another 4+ kilometers round trip, kind of early afternoon at this point. It's beautiful. Kids are having a great time. It's up in the mountains, following this small river stream. Walking along, get to a swimming hole. Brilliant, like crystal clear mountain water.
Yeah.
Awesome, right?
Nice.
And then so should we go back or no? Let's keep going to the waterfall. Like kids are on board. It's another kilometer or two down the trail. So we walk all the way to the waterfall, have another swim there, and then walk all the way back. And we kind of had an idea that this place closed at 5, like the kind of hub, the start of the trail, where there was a restaurant and where there was tons of like tour buses that piled people off. There actually wasn't anyone, I guess. There were very few people who actually did the hike, or maybe they'd all come and gone by the time we were there. So we walk back and then get back to the trailhead and we're like, where is everyone? And there's like, we were just thinking, we're going to get a taxi. We're going to get a taxi back. And we told the kids that the whole time. Don't worry, we're going to get a taxi back. You just got to get back to the top of the trail and like,
Yeah.
your walking day is done kind of thing. And we get back and like crickets. There's like the watchy man, the guard man was there. And we're like, where's the taxis? He's like, you didn't arrange for a taxi to pick you up? No, we didn't.
And what time was this? Like mid-afternoon?
We got there at 5 o'clock.
Okay. Oh, that's kind of late.
Which is like when it was like when we were walking back, there was like another guy who kind of looks after the place, and he's like, "Is there anyone else at the waterfall?" He's like, "Yeah, there's one guy back there, but there's no one else." He was like doing his like end of day check kind of thing, right? So we get back to the trailhead, and it's like there's no one there, and the guardman kind of like looks at us. Okay, like these people are kind of in a tight spot. And he's like, you can walk back. There's a shortcut. You just go down there over that hill and keep going. You'll see Trinidad on the hill in the distance. Like, oh, so we're like that way over there, down there. It's like, he's like, all right. He calls these muchachos, these young guys across the bridge at the other side of the creek. And he's like, hey, you guys walking back? Take these people with you. I'm like, all right, I guess we're walking back. But thankfully, there's a shortcut that instead of like an 8-kilometer walk back, we had like a 4-5-kilometer walk back. But it was beautiful. So, like the kids are like, oh, you're kidding me. It's like 5 o'clock. We just walked like 10 kilometers all day. And now we got to walk home. I'm like, okay, like we can do this. And it was beautiful though. It was like that evening light and walking through these beautiful fields full of horses and like hills in the distance with these guys wandering along, along the fence roads.
Nice.
With Trinidad on a hill in the distance. And, it was like another, I don't know, hour and a half or 2 hours or something back at the end of the day.
That would have been cooler too. Better weather, right?
Yeah, it was cool. It wasn't hot. It was super steep hill at the end. And like we got back to the square in Trinidad and it was like, all right, kids, this is exciting. You each get a full can of pop.
Wow.
And they were like, yeah, a can of pop. And it was like they probably walked 14 kilometers or something. They were crazy.
How were they the next day?
They're fine.
Wow.
I don't know. They're like total troopers.
So how does this trip rate out of all the traveling you've done? How does it compare?
Yeah, it's a super easy trip. I think speaking a bit of the language is a huge help. But I mean, people take care of you. We did something similar in Mexico on a much less scale, but when we just had Beatrice, our oldest daughter, we went to Mexico for a couple weeks. And the first week we were just traveling on our own before Laura's family arrived. And we just like picked a town on a map and like, let's take the bus there. Typical of us, bad planning. Like the bus was late and took longer than we thought. And like we're getting dropped off on the side of the highway in the dark at like 7:30 at night. And like wandered into this town. And we're like, with nowhere to stay. And like, woman was like, "Hey, you looking for somewhere to stay?" We're like, "Yeah, come with me." Okay. We stayed at her house for 5 days. And it was great.
Yeah.
And that was Mexico. Like people take care of you. But I mean, there's some risk involved, but I don't know. It was a great trip. At the end, we were like totally hit our stride. It's like, let's keep going, let's just keep this train going. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, were you kind of ready to come home, or could you have gone longer?
I mean, there's mixed feelings. Like, I think we were happy to mix it up a bit and come home, although it was still cold when we got back. So we weren't too happy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we could have kept going.
Well, you've inspired me, and I'm sure a lot of people to consider going. And I feel like it's we've dropped some of the fog and the veil of uncertainty or confusion. Cuba is a type of place that can seem a little intimidating, I think, if because we don't know so much about it and we're not sure what to believe or what to trust, just because just the nature of it. And now I think we can see that it's remarkably safe, it's comfortable. Of course, it helps to speak some Spanish, but you don't have to be super fast or fluent, and you can get around, and even do it with children and young kids. So, I've been to Cuba a couple times now, and it's been resorts, just a family vacation. And I've seen a little snippets of let's call it the real Cuba. But if our family goes back to Cuba, it's certainly going to be in the style that you've done it, so we can really properly see it and understand it. I've always found it to be a fascinating place. The history, of course, and the people and the culture, the music, and so on. And it's nice to know that, well, I guess if you have the passport, that will let you in, but otherwise that it's a place that's welcoming and not intimidating and very much inspiring to go and see.
Yeah, I would say so.
So thanks very much for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
And maybe we'll catch up with you again in a few weeks when you have the completely opposite perspective of Western Europe.
Yeah, we have it all, like, quote unquote, all sketched out. I'm flying to Paris and then going to a little town in the Loire Valley, or be there for a week or so. And then we're going to head south to the Basque area. I was trying to memorize the name of the Basque country in Basque. Yeah, because they don't call it Basque. Euskadi, that's what it is. Euskadi. Anyways, we'll spend a couple weeks down there and then go back to Paris for a week.
Great. So that's my brother Andy. Just spent 6 weeks traveling around Cuba with his wife and their 3 young kids. And it's been great to learn about how you did it.
Yeah. Thanks, Ted.